And we're live.
Okay, thank you and welcome to the overview of the Scrutiny Management Committee for the 29th of October 2021. We're still following the Council's protocols, remote working protocols. I won't read the whole paragraph, but just to say, as usual, if you can, while you're not speaking, if you can knock your cameras off and be on mute, and then the chair will call you to speak. Okay, so thank you all. We've got a one-item agenda today, which is the climate change strategy. But first of all, do we have any apologies for today's meeting?
We have apologies from Councillor Al-Nawami and Councillor Ferris.
Okay, thank you. And do we have any declarations of interest with regard to this report? No. Okay, thank you. So we've firstly covered the minutes of the previous meeting from the 23rd of September 21. I think we've already mentioned on here that there's a change that needs to be made on the attendance of that meeting, please, Connor. To Councillor Chris Evans had given apologies for that meeting and was on the attendance list.
Yeah, I'll have that changed.
Okay, and so if we go through then, so that there's no numbering on this page, so if you just bear with me, so we'll go through the first page, the second page, third page, fourth page, fifth page, sixth page, seventh page.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's on the 7th page, but as you say, they're not numbered. But it did say the committee moved for a vote, but the minutes didn't say what the recommendations were, and I think it's important that the recommendations of what we actually voted on were listed below that for future reference.
I will have that added to the minutes as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then, oh, that's it. Well, apart from a paragraph on the final page. Okay, can I move those as a true reflection of the meeting for the 23rd?
Moved.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if we go into the agenda item number 4, and I invite Paul Jones to bring forward the report, please.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. I'm going to be assisted this morning by Emma Wakeham and Ross Cublip, who are going to do most of the talking, I think. We're just going to share with you a brief presentation, then we'll hand over to questions, if that's okay. Emma, could you share the presentation, please? Brilliant. Okay, so the purpose of today is to do our draft climate change plan for consultation. The next slide, please, Emma. So this is our draft that's going to go out to consultation shortly. It sets out our proposed themes, priorities, actions, and the milestones that we need to take to the council over the next 5 years to reach our net zero targets. It's quite apt timing with Welsh Government launching their net zero strategy yesterday, and of course COP26 just on the horizon. So the important bit to remember about this is the council's climate change strategy. We'll be working for a broader Newport climate change strategy further down the line, but this is the important first step in that for us. But we recognise within this that, as well as our direct emissions, because the emissions from the public sector are only around about 1%, we also have a key influencing role. So that's also picked up in some of the narrative on our strategy. So key aims of this is public sector needs to reach net zero by 2030, which sounds a long way off, but isn't. It's only 9 years now. And so we need to review our services we provide to ensure that we're on the right track. We've made good progress over the last 3 or 4 years, and we've had a 30% reduction in emissions, and Ross will go into some of the stuff that we've done already, but there's a long way to go, and it's getting, now it's getting serious for councils. So that's the purpose of this strategy. Emma?
Thank you, Paul. Morning, councillors. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where we are now and what we've been doing over the past 4 years. So the chart you're looking at the moment shows our annual total carbon emissions And this is from our built estate and from our fleet. So previously, these were the only areas that we were required to report on. And we've previously had in place a carbon management plan, which has set targets in relation to these two areas. So our baseline year for this was 2017 and 2018, where we were emitting just over 17,000 tonnes. And we set a target of a 20% reduction by 2022. So we've been outperforming that target to date. And as you can see, as you move from the left of the chart across to the right, the emissions have been declining. That's the blue area. Obviously, 2020, 2021 was a bit of a strange year for us in terms of the coronavirus pandemic, but we do believe we'll continue to see that reduction as we move forward. Next slide, please. So just to give you an overview of the types of projects we've been doing, starting at the top left, we've undertaken a widespread rollout of solar PV, and the majority of this solar PV has been community energy. So we've worked with partners to deliver systems across a range of buildings, including our schools. And if you look at the bottom right there, you can see one of the systems on schools and some of the engagement activities that have happened with our pupils. In terms of energy efficiency measures, a lot of what we've been doing is around replacing older lighting with more efficient LED lighting. One of the kind of headline projects there is in our velodrome, where we've replaced all the track lighting and actually all the lighting in the entire building. We've also done a lot of measures in terms of electric vehicle charging, both within our own fleet. So we should have all cars and light vans over to electric by the end of this year. And we've also installed public charging for residents and visitors across all of our pay and display car parks. And that's a program that we're continuing to roll out this year to install rapid charging hubs and also chargers for residents on the highway. So one of the flagship things we've done in relation to electric vehicles is we were the first local authorities in Wales to have a fully electric refuse collection vehicle that you can see there at the bottom left of the image. And we will actually have almost half of our fleet will be electric by the end of this year. So if I could move on, please, Emma. So in addition to the measures I've discussed already at the top of this list, we've, as a team, we've also undertaken a lot of water conservation, installing metering, working hard to sort of stop leaks and install devices to save water. And then more widely outside of the council, we have signed up to the Gwent Healthy Travel Charter. So the charter was launched in November 2020. There are 23 public service board organisations that have signed up, and this commits them to 15 actions over 3 years. So the charter contains a series of commitments to support staff and visitors to help reduce travel, walk and cycle more, to take public transport and to switch to electric vehicles. The council have also approved 2 low carbon housing developments. This is where the developers have agreed not to use any fossil fuels to provide heating. The developments also include sustainable drainage and have incorporated ecological enhancements. And this type of development really needs to be a template for what we need to see going forward if we're to hit our 2050 carbon net zero commitments. Next slide, please, Emma. So if we move on a step from our carbon management plan and we look towards our climate strategy that we're presenting to you today, the key difference in that is that we're now having to account for all of our organisational carbon emissions. So to the left of the black line on the page, you'll see the emissions that we were previously reporting. So that's our fuel for heating, fuel for heat and electricity that are used in buildings. And under the new strategy, we're taking a sort of much broader view. We're looking at the emissions from water, from staff commuting, from our land and sort of owned land. But the key thing you'll see there that makes the largest difference is the effect of our procurements. So the carbon emissions that we're responsible for through the goods and services that we commission. Next slide, please. So this is my final slide, and this is just to illustrate the kind of scaling up of the work we have to do in relation to tackling our emissions now. So if we take you back to 2017-18, on the left-hand side, you can see the emissions I was previously referring to. These are the Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. These are emissions in our buildings and our fleet. As we move across to the right, you can see our new baseline year coming into effect with the new methodology, which is 2019 and 2020. And you can see the additional contribution from that procurement and other measures. Essentially, we've have to now tackle sort of 4 to 5 times the amount of emissions as we were previously dealing with for our own organisation, as well as supporting the city to decarbonise as well. Okay, thank you very much. Over to you, Emma.
Okay, so what's the content in the climate change plan that we're talking about today? So as Ross has said, we've made lots of progress, but there's still lots that we need to do as a council. We've set out this climate change plan around 6 themes, and these are organisational leadership and culture, our buildings, our land, transport and mobility, the goods and services that we procure, and also our wider role. Now, these are loosely set around the route map to decarbonisation that's been set out by the Welsh Government, which is meant to support local authorities in reaching that 2030 net zero carbon emissions figure. So those are the 6 themes. I'll go into each of those themes in a little bit of detail before we go to questions. So the first one, organisational leadership and culture, and this is about how we as a council sort of think about, you know, how we look at the climate emergency and look at how we make it at the heart of everything that we do. You know, think about how it affects the decisions we make every day, and the projects that we as a council take forward. So there's 4 priorities in this section, and this is about how the financial commitment that we put into that, how we upskill and train our staff and members to understand the things that we need to do going forward, and how we embed it into our corporate plan and all of our plans and strategies for the future. Theme 2 is around our buildings, and Ross has talked about this already, and we're already well on the way to improving the carbon emissions for our buildings. So we've sort of got a vision there to achieve net zero carbon energy across all of our buildings by 2030, and that's the areas that we need to think about is when we're building new council buildings, how, you know, making sure that those new buildings are net zero, but also retrofitting our existing buildings and looking at whether we need all the buildings that we have and considering carbon emissions in that process. So theme 3 is about our land. So there's we can use our land for carbon capture. So we need to think about how we better manage our trees and woodland, our green space, and sort of use those areas in a more sustainable way, so we can capture the benefits of those areas as well. We also need to think about the land that we lease. How is that being managed in a sustainable way too? Theme 4 is about transport. So not only looking at our fleet and our staff mileage and commuting, how do we support the city around its transport network. How do we make sure that planning and placemaking is considering sustainable transport in its process, supporting active travel and public transport and charging point infrastructure, and looking at how our children are travelling to school, and also looking at our how we license our taxis going forward as well. Theme 5 is a really important one, because as Ross has mentioned already, you know, the goods and services we procure are a huge amount, you know, section of our carbon emissions currently. So we need to start looking at this area in more detail. So we need to put sort of guidance and measurement in place so that we can start to procure services that have a less of an impact on our carbon footprint, and also consider the climate impacts going forward. And then the last theme is our wider role. So how do we support the city to reach carbon zero by 2050? So that's looking at how we plan our communities, you know, the waste that we manage across the city. How do we manage flooding? How do we work with our partners and our communities to improve things around net carbon zero and also climate change? And one of the other areas that we're looking at as well is planning energy systems across the city. So how do we move to decarbonise the energy that our communities use and our industries use across the city? Okay, so that covers all of the themes. So I'll just hand back to Paul for the last slide.
Thank you, Emma. I think that's hopefully, councillors, a useful summary of the document, and you've had some time to read through what we've sent you. We've listed you some suggested lines of inquiry, but really we're after your input into your thoughts on the draft plan, and you know how we reach that vision of net zero by 2030. So we're really just open to questions now.
Thanks all. That's a really interesting presentation, and I know we've discussed this previously in the pre-meeting, that it's a really well written report. You know, it's easily readable, and especially you know, it's nice to see the terms at the beginning as well, because obviously there's a lot of scientific and technical terms in this which people might just be reading and it going over the top of their head. Obviously my one concern, which is your biggest concern, is the procurement, and it's, you know, what are we suggesting then on this in terms of measurement? Is this going to be put on are we going to be putting in our contracts that we can audit these guys at any time, or, you know, so when we take on a tender or we take on the new we start the new procurement with a company, is it to go in the contract that, you know, we're expecting them to see to make these gains towards net zero, and then, like I said, from that, then how do we ensure that is happening? So does it, you know, I'm aware that our auditors are already under enough pressure with what they've already have to do to then bring them onto our suppliers and things like that. You know, how does that feasibly work for us as a council?
Ross, I don't know if you want to pick up the specifics of where we got to on that. You're right to highlight that this is the procurement is a big challenge for us. The challenges in terms of cost and technology are around buildings and vehicles, but we're starting to eat into that, as Ross showed by some examples. You know, we're starting to decarbonise our vehicles and our fleet. Is expensive, but we're progressing, and similar with our buildings. But yeah, getting our head around procurement is a big challenge. I don't know, Ross, Emma, you want to come in on that?
I can sort of talk about that. We're just starting to look at bringing in a framework that will look at contracts. When will we go out to procure? We're hopeful that this framework will look at a range of different things relating to social value, and carbon emissions and climate action will be part of that framework. So that will enable us to score each sort of contract that we're going out to commission on, look at those things and make sure that we are considering them at a really early stage. I think Ross, there is probably, Ross might be able to give a bit more details. I think we're also looking at plans to measure the current contracts in a more accurate way as well, because at the moment the figures from procurement are an estimate, because obviously we haven't been out and looked at every single contract across because that would be a huge task. Did you want to cover some of that, Ross?
Yeah, so thank you. It was a good introduction. So it's worth saying with the new Welsh Government reporting requirements that we just started using and we're working to, they are in their first year. So there's an acknowledgement from Welsh Government that there's a lot of need for refinement in the procurement area, because it's currently done on emissions per pound spent, per sector. So one of the early things we need to do, as Emma said, is to kind of work with our supply chains to start refining some of that to improve that accuracy. Now, as you appreciate, this is going to be common to the whole of the public sector in Wales. And so there is an acknowledgement of that across all bodies and within Welsh Government. So there are some work streams happening to look at the kind of some of the larger common suppliers across all of the public bodies, to start to make the figures more accurate with them, because we also have to acknowledge that sort of adding additional requirements around sort of carbon reporting may not be so straightforward for some of our kind of local smaller suppliers. So it's about sort of that 80-20 rule, really. We're going to be starting at the top with the biggest suppliers and working in those areas, and they may be best placed, and they may already be doing it, and they may be best placed to actually have the size of company and the staff on board to actually start to make changes that are acceptable to us, that they can pass on to ourselves. So as I said, this is the first year of reporting, and there's a journey to go on in that area specifically.
Can I follow up on that then, if I may? I'm thinking of then, so will we be putting a framework or a guideline together, or guidance together then for our schools, for example? Maybe not the primary schools, because the procurement isn't so much, but with the secondary schools, will we be giving them a guideline then of because obviously we need them to then procure based on this guidance, really, this guideline. So is that something that we would then look at presenting out to all our schools and other sort of community centres and different things to follow these guidelines?
Yes, so we'll need to put guidelines in place, but we also need to provide support around assessing the impact, the carbon impact of procurement and decisions. So we're going to have to build resource internally in order to do that. Okay.
Thank you. And just one question. I know this is mentioned with regards to the fleet and changing the fleet over. The one car I can think of that is obviously the notable one is the mayor's car, is the Civic car. When will that be? When we're looking at changing that onto electric, because that's the one that people are thinking, well, follow your example.
It's an hybrid now, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say it is a hybrid currently, although it's not got a lot of use over the last 18 months, so it's probably had lower emissions by default. But yeah, all the cars and vans are gradually being changed over. I think by next year the last lot of cars will be fully electric. But you're right, it's a prominent vehicle, and one of the things we are doing as well is we've realised that. We've rolled out quite a lot of electric small vans, and it's not actually clear they are electric, so we are making sure they're branded so people can see, because it's all part about changing the feeling and how people think and react to electric vehicles, and them becoming the norm. And so as an influencing role, it's as important that as we're doing that, it's helping shape people's thoughts on it. Of course,
because normally you have the green square, don't you, if it's an electric car? I know, because I've got one. You've got a green square on the registration plate, but I didn't know that until I had it. But and the other thing is as well is the electric charging points we're running short, but they also need to be the super fast, don't they? Because it's absolutely it's a nightmare. you know, for example, the service stations, which is nothing to do with us, you park up in a service station, none of them have got these super fast, so you're looking at 10% per hour almost. You know, that's not, there's, you know, that's difficult. But it would be good then to see all of our charging points be, you know, the super fast, where you get sort of 80% in half an hour is what we're looking at, isn't it?
So we've got a mix. We've rolled out some of the slower, and it's confusing terminology, isn't it? The fast chargers, which are the slower ones, and then the rapid ones, which are the ones that and the super rapid ones, which are the ones that we really want. But it's a bit of horses for courses. So where we've got people long-term parking, the slower trickle type ones, and at council facilities, that perhaps works better. But we are now rolling out some more rapid chargers, and we've been working on a programme. We've got more funding for that for this year. It is quite challenging because we've got to work on where there's the correct infrastructure in place, because it's not just, you know, plop it down anywhere. It's where the connection is and where Western Power can take the pull. You're right on the green square, but we bought a lot of ours just before the green square come in. My own car's electric, and I don't have. I think I was a month before the green square come in.
You
I was
need to
going
get
to
a badge
in on my reg. But you know, I think if you look over the last 2 years, the charging infrastructure in Newport has improved dramatically. But you're right, there's a long way to go. But grants from Welsh Government and from our other partners, we're on a clear journey. The rapid charging is the key next step, I think. The best one I've used is not a council one, but on Malpas Road, the BP garage there.
Yeah, that is the best one. That is the best one. Or one in Tesco's. No, that is. But like you said, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. In the inner city, charging points are great. You know, you've got them at Bannatyne, you've got them at Costa, you've got them everywhere, blind, you know, all different places. But where this is falling down, and I guess this is a Welsh Government, I'm not sure, is the issue of the service stations. Because if you can't get a rapid charger in a service station and you're doing a journey of 106, because what's your range, 220 miles on a car, you can't stop for 3 or 4 hours to charge it up, and I think that's off-putting for people. But as long as we've got the signposts of to where they are, that you can come into the city and charge up in a loop, then you know it's great. But okay, thanks. I'm going to open the floor. Councillor Hwrahane.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to talk on the Mayor's car because I think this is looking at the minutiae of the policy that possibly this committee shouldn't be looking at. Because just to change a car because we think it'll be a good PR statement to say we're on a green car, I think is the wrong approach. If the Mayor's car needs changing, obviously it should be changed to a electric car. But if the Mayor's car doesn't need changing, the total carbon footprint that buying a new large limousine would create far outweighs any small savings we might get from changing from a hybrid to an electric. The major overriding point I wanted to ask Paul really was, it's a little bit unfortunate we're dealing with this excellent report today, which is, as already been said, extremely well written. But yesterday the Welsh Assembly Government put out their guidance on this, and I don't know if officers have had an opportunity yet to have a browse through that and see if there are any glaring omissions in our report or contradictions indeed, and can that be dealt with before this comes back to us, if indeed it's coming back to us after consultation?
Yeah, so we were aware of, we've been involved in some of the informal consultation around Welsh Government, and Ross and Emma sit in a number of groups. So there's nothing really in the Welsh Government plan that's a surprise, and we've all been collectively as councils on a sort of joint journey. But we obviously, the final strategy now we will review. Yes, but this is one of those things where you can never quite get it lined up because there's always something changing, and you know, we've got this at the moment with technology changing so rapidly that you start projects and halfway through you've got to think about doing them a little bit different because targets and technology have moved on. But you're right, we need to make sure that we align with that. I don't think there'll be much, but there probably will be some references that we need to make sure that we talk to.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to come in maybe later in the debate, depending on how the debate goes on some technical issues. But overall, I'm very satisfied with this roadmap, if I can put it that way. Everybody else seems to be using that expression. to 2050.
Turbocharged.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Councillor Chris Evans.
All right, I thought Yvonne was next.
Yeah, I've got my hand
Oh,
up.
sorry, I couldn't miss that.
No,
Sorry,
go on,
Councillor Forsey, apologies.
As always.
Exactly, as always, Chris. I have to say, I do think this is the most exciting report to come to scrutiny in the nearly 5 years that I've been here. I think it's really, you know, excellent in content as well as the presentation. I've got a number of points I want to bring up, but I'll just start with a few. I'm wondering whether this future reports will need to be supported with some sort of technical document, because I find myself going through here thinking, how is this going to be measured? How is this going to be, you know, broken down? And I think at some point we will need more information on it. The procurement area is something that I think needs breaking down into more sections. You know, are we taking into account how much it costs us to do a new bit of road compared with the books that is, you know, they might buy in a school? There's so many aspects to that I think at some point that's going to have to be broken down into more sections. Another point I'd like to raise is I wonder if the council is going to consider some sort of offsetting programme at some point in the future, that some people who like to try and offset their carbon emissions by doing offsetting, if it could be local and council run, is that something we could consider? And I'll just finish with a question for now. There's talk in the report of a local area management plan, and I wondered if we could have some information around that, please.
Thanks, Councillor. A lot of good points there. In terms of the technical stuff, you're right, but this is purposely a top level, you know, first statement, and there will be a lot of stuff that falls from this, but also it will inform other government's other council plans. So, for example, you're talking about how we do it with road building or school books. So the council has a highway asset management plan. The next time that's reviewed, it will then have to take on aspects of carbon impact and this net zero plan. So, you know, it will take a while to filter down to them. But you're right, we're at the start of this journey, and the detail will come and follow. So this is, you know, really around the key principles. In terms of offsetting, there will be a bit in that, and we are very focused on having it community or council led where possible, and there's some talk of that in the document. I'll perhaps hand over to Ross and Emma to pick up the specifics.
So in terms of well, it could be called offsetting, but we sort of focus on some technical term, but carbon sequestration. So you'll see within our carbon baseline, there's a small negative area, and that's our sort of owned land, you know, where we have where we have trees, etc. currently, and you know, we have an amount of opportunity to continue to do things like plant trees to continue to capture carbon, but in terms of our own land, that is probably quite limited. So, you know, within our city, we will have to look to work with partners and other groups to increase that over time. But the principle of offsetting, I would say, is in terms of the hierarchy of what we should be doing. You know, it is sort of further down the hierarchy. We should be doing as much as we can upfront to sort of reduce our emissions by other means through efficiencies. You know, and then we may be left with a small remainder, you know, that we just can't remove. And at that point, we'd look to make sure that that was offset.
And the local area energy plan, where are plans for that at the moment?
Emma, probably best you pick that one up, is it?
Yeah, no problem. I currently project manage the local area energy plan. So we've currently got consultants working on that with us in partnership. And we've had a number of workshops working with across the energy sector and also other partners to look at how we move sort of energy systems for the whole of Newport towards decarbonisation by 2050. So that's looking at domestic energy, industrial energy, and also the transport across the city as well. We should have a draft plan in December, so that this project's been underway for the last sort of 9 months, and we should have a draft in December and a final report in the new year, which will give us a plan of how we would move towards decarbonising energy. So, you know, from a domestic point of view, that would be looking at all sorts of things, you know, like solar panels and but also how, you know, whether we need to put in solar farms. The biggest problem we've got in Newport is sort of land and how much space we've got. So it's also looking across other areas within the region as well to see how we can support each other, because Newport's quite a small county and there's pressure for other things like tree planting and also you know, all sorts of other things, building houses. You know, the pressures on land in Newport is quite high. So it would be, I think, impossible for us to source all of our energy needs within the Newport area. So that plan will set out how that will all work, and we should have a final report for in January, February time to share with people.
Thank you. I'll come back with some more points later, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Chris Evans.
Yeah, it's like others have said, it's, you know, honestly genuinely good to come back to like a first meeting for, I know, a few, well, 3-4 months, and have such a brilliant report. It looks like it's been written with passion, you know, and you know, it is genuinely really good. Thank you. Guys, it's obviously though are important for us, Paul, to, you know, give some sort of feedback. And I think in your introduction, you know, you mentioned things like ideas and comments and so on. So that's what I'm going to focus on. Some of the feedback, comments and ideas are covered within the report, and I don't want to get too hung up on, you know, heat pumps or whatever else, but I've tried to break it down into particular sections that I wanted to cover and try to make it, you know, as less waffly as possible. I think with this is like partnership is key, and the council will not achieve, particularly by 2050, what it wants to achieve without a partnership approach, you know, just as a singular organisation. However, the strategy up until 2030 is one of leadership as a council, and I kind of get, you know, I do get that, yeah. So I offer that as a caveat, you know, to the other things. But maybe perhaps if the council could look at, and I know it's worked well in other regions, set up an environmental sustainability board, because we've got like a business board, and Matthew will know the name of this. But, you know, that could even be expanded, couldn't it? So it's like council, business, residents, partners, third sector, you know, because we need to get that partnership working from day one. I know you do it in loads of other areas, Paul, you know, and, you know, you might be able to point to an organisation that I've missed, so apologies if that is the case. Maybe bring it all under a title, like you could do something better than this, like, you know, One Green City, you know, working together. I know that that approach has served Bristol well and has manifested itself in Bristol working in with a partnership organisation via what would be central government in Bristol to offer grants for free solar panels and home insulation, you know. So that's been a consequence of the partnership working. I know it's complicated, but they put it under the One City banner, you know, and it's like that partnership approach, you know, which I know you do in other areas, Paul, and like you're really excited to tell us about it, and there might be something on the horizon. So that basically was one thing that could be perhaps constructive to offer. And this isn't meant to be negative, but some of my frustrations, and they are frustrations and probably personal to me, but you must perhaps allow me to vent them, is, planning. And I do understand that, we have to have particular powers to enforce something, but we only get those powers if we lobby Welsh Government or central government, and I think we need to be a little bit more passionate and direct about that. And I'm just going to go, I'm looking out my window and, I know there are lots of different heat pumps, and I bow to other members' vast knowledge on that, but we're still building homes without heat pumps, with conventional boilers, community, Jubilee Park, not one charge point, flats without integrated recycling, the new estates without proper, so retrospectively, public transport links, and I know, and even, cycle racks, we're building, new homes without cycle racks, and I know you've done some great work with some of the partner organizations like Pobble, particularly on like the city centre developments, and I think Newport City Homes, but it would perhaps be a miss of not to point out a few challenges, and, not like getting, I know you don't do this, but not like getting into this catch-22, which is, well, we don't have the powers to do that. But at the very least, we should perhaps be suggesting, at planning, as a prerequisite, and this one example that you cited, Paul, of like the development with the green spaces and the eco and so on, and seeing all this sort of throughout the city is good, and there is movement, so and I have been quite, prior to taking a little bit of time off, active in saying, like in ICROSS, that no, it's important, let's have that eco area there, so I temper it with that. So that's my frustrations, which I think would be a miss not to point out. And then finally, as regards the consultation process, and I think in this committee, but definitely in other committees, I have, we consult broadly, don't we? And it goes up on the website and we tweet things out and all the rest of it, which is great, but I think sometimes earmarking particular groups to go to, and I've suggested this in the past, is potentially like a good idea. And just a couple as regards the consultation, obviously there's the youth climate ambassadors, in Newport, which are being used some by the Welsh Government to develop their strategies. So, taking it to them would possibly be a good idea, and saying, can we have your feedback on this, and I'm aware that in Rogerstone and throughout Newport, most schools, if not all, have their environmental groups and climate action groups. They're called different things in different schools, but going out to the schools and kind of asking, as part of their schoolwork for their feedback on it. Develop and deliver a one. I think it might be worth also, I'm just looking at some other things I put on. I don't want to, if we could have sessions to train city leaders, councillors and staff on climate change, so that we're able to respond to the climate emergency in everything we do, so like training sessions might be good if it was, something that you wanted to discover. And yeah, that's about it, because I think if we were honest about this, there's still an element of resistance from the general public as regards, sort of climate change, and educating ourselves is probably key to educating our residents, and and it's not bad then, it's a sandwich, but it's genuinely like a really, really good report, and like, thank you for presenting it.
Thank you, Councillor. Nice to have you back. I'll try and take a few of those points, but in terms of consultation, there's a lot of groups we've already earmarked. And I think we might have even started with the Youth Council, Emma, but Emma can give some more detail on those groups. But we're happy to pick up with any groups requested by the committee. That would be good.
There's specifically youth climate ambassadors, which is like a separate group.
Yeah, so we'll definitely take that on board, and any other groups you want us to work with. This is genuinely an open consultation. Sometimes it feels like we're sometimes coming to these groups with we've got to get this through and we've got to take on board, but this is this is for all of us. You're right in terms of partnership, absolutely. Public sector's 1% would, if we just deal with our bit, no one else gets involved, it's not gonna work. But this is very much around, and the reason the targets are front loaded to the public sector is so that we can play a big influencing role. And it's not, I mentioned earlier about our electric vehicles. When people see them around, they think, oh, actually, God, you can pick up the refuse in them. Maybe they can go further than I thought, and starts to change some of those moods. But also in terms of when just the purchasing power the council has. So if we buy all our vans and they're all electric, then local suppliers have the infrastructure in place, so it's easier for smaller businesses to do that on the back of us. So that's important as well. But you're right, and some of the projects we've done have already been in partnership. Ross mentioned some of the community energy schemes, and that's a really exciting area. Take on board what you said about having environmental sustainability board. My wife is actually a director of Bristol Green Capital, which oversees it, so I know a lot about that, and it's a really interesting model, and something that we're going to look at in terms of how we oversee this. But I think what you got to remember is, although this agenda is moving rapidly, and we've had a clear push this year in terms of some additional funding into this team. It's still a very small team of a few people hobbled together. Of course, that'll be reflected in the council restructure as we move forward. But obviously, it's a rapidly growing area, so it's something that we need to start realigning services around, but involve broader partners. So it's but I think that's a really exciting area we can go. There is a sustainable transport group amongst the PSB, but obviously the PSB is changing. We're looking how we change and morph that. So there's a lot of ideas out there, but the core point is valid and something that we pick up, and we will pick up throughout that. I'm just trying to see what.
I think that's it. I was just planning that the frustrations, Paul.
Yeah. But you're right, and there will be resistance, but things are changing, and this is a positive step. Emma, I don't know if you want to come in on consultation first.
There was one other which I kind of missed, which was and this isn't meant, quantifying the councils. I think it's quite difficult to quantify. How can I say this? Indirect emissions. So I'm sure other regions have done it. I have no evidence of that, but quantifying indirect emissions and a strategy for that might also be an idea. But anyway, sorry, that's it. Yeah.
Ross, is it worth you explaining the scope 1, 2, 3 bit in terms of that direct, indirect, and how the emissions are calculated? You're muted, Ross.
It had to happen.
It had to.
No meeting's complete without someone talking on mute. So in terms of the scope 1 and 2 emissions that I touched on previously, they are focused on the sort of direct fuels we use within our buildings. That would be our scope 1 principally, and our sort of transport fuels. And then the scope 2 would be things like our electricity usage. Now that's actually called indirect emissions because the emissions from our electricity are generated where the electricity is created. Maybe that's a gas plant, or a small amount of emissions from things like waste incinerators, etc. So the scope 3 is the kind of key area of truly indirect emissions. So I think through our procurements and through picking up things like staff commuting, we should be covering our indirect impact. If there's anything that you can sort of think of that we may not be measuring, happy to take that on board, and maybe that's something we can include in the future.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Matthew Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, like everybody else here, I welcome the report, and I'm glad to see a report which isn't 10,000 pages long as well, which is always a benefit. I suggest actually if I went on to all the links, it probably would be about 10,000 pages. But just following on from some of Chris's points, you know, the ones about planning, and I guess there's still a lot of hypocrisy here, because take, for instance, the Queen's Hill site, classed as a brownfield site, but with lots of playing fields, okay, and there was an opportunity for us there. We talk about urban green space to set an example and to go, and yet we've been pressurised by the Welsh Government to build higher density developments. So I guess from that point of view, perhaps some feedback going back, well, similarly with what I call garden grabbing, we're still giving planning permission to build density houses in people's gardens. Now, from an environmental point of view, I can't understand why we're still doing this. So perhaps some feedback to say, well, it's all very well having this and setting targets, but at the same time, you're telling us to build higher density developments, which from my point of view are not good. And similarly, we're talking about these plans need to be can be costly, and I guess there aren't any specific costings in here. Are they realistic? Are they achievable? And the most important thing is about public buy-in, because take, for instance, you know, headline one day about steel plant closing, then all politicians, I'm sorry, regardless of way, will be calling for those jobs to be saved. So there is a realism which we need to attach. And when it comes to the public, take, for instance, public transport. Now, we don't have public transport 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've had a lot of complaints recently about the flexi buses. They're a fantastic idea, but you know, my inbox is full of complaints, and hopefully they'll be able to resolve them. But again, we need to recognise, if you're a social worker, there's no way you better use public transport to go from A to B to C to D, even with the most efficient transport system in the world. You know, perhaps if we had a tube network like London, then maybe that's right. So I guess public buy-in is going to be important. And I welcome the fact when you're talking about businesses, because the last thing we want to do with small businesses is overload them with carbon reduction plans and things which are completely above their head. And, you know, we need to still encourage jobs and create jobs to ensure the longer term. And I suppose the other thing which isn't in there, and maybe I shouldn't mention this, but is it perhaps time to revisit a barrage or a tidal lagoon or something like that? Again, I know there's environmental consequences for doing that, but as we say, it's not easy, and there will be, even with the most environmentally friendly schemes, there will be issues. So just really some observations, I suppose.
I think you're on mute there, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. I don't think I picked up the planning point fully from previous Councillor Chris Evans. So just to touch on that, you're right. It is a challenge, and often planning is constrained by how it can operate. But when we are kicking back and we are lobbying, and I know Tracy does a lot of that, and we've been doing that ourselves, as of other councils. But also there is changes in planning policy that do reflect some of these environmental policies. The problem is sometimes people will have planning permission from quite a long time back, and it takes a while to feed through into delivery. So you know, we're seeing this with sustainable drainage. The requirements only came into place from 2019, and effectively, if people had outline planning, nothing happened till 2020. So it's only really now we're even seeing sustainable drainage come through as issue. But you're right in terms of land use, and I think, you know, some of that will follow on from Welsh Government's announcement yesterday, hopefully, and that will help us towards that. In terms of costs, we consciously didn't include costs because it's a rapidly evolving area, and it's very challenging to understand how to cost it. I'll give you an example of you know, the refuse collection vehicles we've got. A normal refuse collection vehicle costs around about 200,000. The electric ones cost around 400,000. We got a grant for that, so we still only paid 200,000. But we don't yet know what the fuel fuel costs will be, because we know we're avoiding our diesel cost, and we know we got a lot lower maintenance cost, which so we think that the payback and it will equalise around about 8 years, but no one's ever run an electric refuse vehicle for 8 years to know and understand that. So it's a really evolving issue. Similar, we've had conversations around removal of gas and the cost of alternative options, but over the period of the 2 months we've been having those conversations, the price of gas has gone up 250%, so it's almost irrelevant. So it's such a rapidly moving area, and the finances are changing, but we recognise that there's costs in there, not all of which will be fully recovered by savings yet, but technology is moving at a rapid pace, and things like electric vehicles, when they get to mass production, we think that those costs will normalise, but it's a big challenge for us. So in terms of the barrage, I don't know about that. I'm not sure whether that is or how that works, but we can. I don't think we considered that
for a long time. It was turned down back in the 80s or 90s, but yeah, I guess from harnessing, you know, the
William Hague, wasn't it, Matt?
It was indeed, Chris. Yes, yeah, it was. For environmental reasons, which is the irony of it all, isn't it? So,
but you are right. It's with all these things, it is a balance of different environmental pulls. We talked about solar farms, and so we've got challenges on land that we have, you know, we want to use for biodiversity and some of our invertebrate work that we're doing, but also then that land is one for solar farms, I think. And so it is a balance between different environmental pulls, and that's something that we've got to address, and we've got to try and navigate as well. Ross and Emma, I don't know if you wanted to come in on any of those points.
No, I think you gave a good summary, Paul. Thank you.
So, Paul, the only other thing was, again, recognising that, you know, when I mentioned about public transport, not 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and actually recognising that people like social workers are going to need and not to ensure that we prohibit and make it just completely impossible for them to do their jobs. So,
yeah, I think it's right. I think it's a balance. Obviously, the new transport strategy, you know, prioritises us trying to use active travel where possible first off, and then public transport, and then sustainable vehicles, and then lastly combustion engine vehicles, and there's recognised there'll still be a role for that. I think the direction of travel though is just to try and reduce that, and particularly for short journeys, because, you know, and I'm as guilty as anyone, you know, I live about 400 meters from the Civic, but I often drive to the Civic because I'm in a rush and I've got a 3-year-old child and everything goes crazy in the morning. But it's you know, it's around us trying to gradually move away and reduce our dependence on personal transport, but not totally eliminate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fors, you want to come back in?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to move on to some of the actions that go from page 20 onwards, if I may. The first one, and how it will be measured, is about training for elected members. I suggest that we could also measure the carbon footprint of elected members, and we could give them a score, which might be gold, silver, bronze, orange, yellow, brown, maybe, having chosen those colours thoughtfully. You know, we're measured on our attendance. We could be measured on our carbon footprint as well, to see whether we're walking the walk as well as talking the talk, so to speak. Page 22, we've got a statement in here about using our influence to encourage staff pension fund to invest in ethical based funding. I think this is so important. I get quite a lot of emails about that, and I would definitely just like to highlight that as a really important action that I would like to support. And I'd also like to ask about priority 4 on page 28, which is about council owned leased land, and can we can we encourage our council farms to be organic? And we're talking about green and blue space which is available. So the blue space is about our rivers, and can we reduce the pollution that comes from our council owned land?
Thank you, Councillor. On members, I'm not sure about rating them. That's perhaps one for Gareth Price. Yeah, I'm not sure who would audit that and who would issue out the certification, but the training we did, so we've already done some training. So all the corporate management team at the council and all the cabinet have been through carbon literacy, and also then a wider range of staff whose roles, you know, procurement staff, some of my environmental services staff have also been through that, and so that's something that we're looking to roll out after that as us being a bit of a guinea pig for that. To members as well. You're right in terms of pension fund. The issue we got is Newport doesn't control the pension fund. We signed up to the Greater Gwent pension fund, but yeah, it's something that does need addressing, and I know that the leader has raised concerns on that as well. So you know, we're pushing and we are trying to address that issue. It clearly has to be wrong that public sector workers can't choose to invest in solely environmental or ethical purposes. In terms of council leased land, I'm not sure on that. I don't know whether Ross or Emma have got anything to input.
I would just say it was something that we could obviously pick up with our partners at Newport North and maybe look at the way that the requirements that we put on our tenants, you know, because most of our land is out to tenant farmers or leased on grazing licenses. So that may be something that we could take a look at on an incremental basis going forward as part of the wider review of what we're using that land for, and you know, is that or how can the sustainability of that be improved?
Yeah, I mean, to write the plan, we set up a range of subgroups, and on the land subgroup, Newport North sat on that, and they were part of that conversation to look at that sort of work going forward.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think that is something, if we own the land, like I say, it'd have to be an incremental policy, but we could try to move forward with you know, the best environmental use of that land, and we talk several places in this report about blue spaces, so I think the pollution of our rivers is an important aspect of it. But one other point I'd like to bring in here is about secure bike parking. I know that I'm quite often talking about this. If I cycle to the Civic, where can I park my bike? I know I have a friend who works in social services. She's had 2 bicycles stolen in the past 6 or 7 years. We need not just a bike rack, we need secure parking for bicycles. Otherwise, I could easily cycle to the Civic. But I won't, because there's nowhere secure for me to leave my bicycle when I get there, and similarly for other employees. So I think that's something that needs considering when we say we want people to travel actively. And I am on the cycle crime reduction panel, and I know that the police have done a lot of very good work on trying to reduce cycle theft recently, but secure parking or secure bike storage is needed in our venues, I think, please.
Yep, you're right, and I know Councillor, you've raised this issue before. It's one of the key themes that's come out of the active travel consultation that was just reaching its final conclusion at the moment, and there will be some news on that shortly in terms of some wider improvements on that, but I can't confirm that just yet because we're waiting on some letters.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I slightly follow in on that one with regards to provision at the Civic? And I know where some places that I've seen, and with regards to reducing the car journeys or the commuting with shared cars, or where you can sort of shared lifts. There were preferential parking spaces in some places as long as you had more than one person in the car. I don't know if that's something that we can, you get maybe the front row of the top car park or something where you get these better, if you car share or you're down as a car share person, that you get these different spaces. And as I know in some of the inner cities, I guess it's not always feasible within our city, but you also get car share lanes, don't you, where not just taxi or bus lanes, you get car share lanes, so you're sort of reducing the burden on making one or two cars, or a project of who can car share and when. But though I guess it's slightly less now, we're looking at this hybrid model of work, and you may not have people in at the same time. But I know that was I said preferential spaces we had in one place, you couldn't park in it if you were in that car on your own. So simple little things, I think, were just a bit of a paint job. Phil, you wanted to come back in there?
Yes, thank you. Just on Councillor Forsey's point about ethical investments, I mean, it's a great idea, and it's something we tried to look at in Gwent County Council. So we're going back to the 80s and early 90s, and it's against a background when the whole of Wales was anti-nuclear, if you recall, and we had this great debate about whether those nuclears in Somerset really counted because we took the power off them. But the Gwent Pension Fund in those days obviously resisted ethical investments, and I say we were talking about a whole different climate. And we really, as a council and maybe a committee, need a thought through legal reply as to where we are with ethical investments, because ethical investments didn't always produce the best returns. And I think from memory, it's a long time ago, that it was considered that councils would be liable for any shortfalls in the pension funds should they go down that route of forcing the pension funds to actually go against best financial advice.
It's more for Marion now, isn't it?
Yeah, we can certainly pick that up with Marion. All I would say on that is this is the first job that I've had in 25 years of working where I haven't been able to tick a box that say I'll only have ethical investments in my pension. So I think the issue is that not only that there's a problem with some of the investments, but also that there's no choice for staff. I don't believe it's so much an issue anymore, because actually probably a lot of the smart investment in terms of long term, addressing climate change is going to be businesses that understand that, and I think so. We might even be slightly behind on the curve on that. Just going back to Councillor Lacey's question on shared space usage. So I think in terms of what happens to the Civic now is that's been picked up in the new normal report, which I think may have been to the scrutiny, or part of it's been to the scrutiny. Shared lane usage was looked at in some of the Burns work, but because of the different demands on road space within Newport, it was thought they would get marginal returns, I believe. And so if you're looking to allocate road space, they thought that they would get better returns for allocating it to cycles or whatever. But you're right, so certainly coming in out of Bristol, there's some lanes on that, but that tends to be where you've got some wider, less in demand road space. But certainly those points can be picked up and will feed into the new normal work as well.
Thank you. Councillor Forsey, you want to come back in again?
Thank you. Moving on to page 33, we've got priority 8 and reduce carbon emissions from homeschool travel. There's 2 points here. One is that you've got here about anti-idling campaigns to try and encourage parents not to have their vehicles idling outside of school. But the other suggestion I'd like to make is that we ask schools to report the number of children who come to school by car, perhaps by car, by bus, by foot, or other active travel means. If we ask the schools to report the number of children who come by car, and then we can try and have a sort of incremental decrease year on year. If we measure it, it will focus people's minds. Do you think that's possible?
I think we can pick that up with education colleagues, and a lot of schools are very interested in this aspect of council work. So I'm sure some of them would volunteer for that sort of plan, but we'll pick that up with education colleagues.
Yeah, I think some schools are more interested than others, maybe. Thank you.
Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. I've been having problems with my computer as well, and hear me now even. But I just wanted to say as well that, you know, it's a very good report, and I already had a meeting earlier this week with more electric chargers, and this is going to be, I think, which is, you know, is brilliant. I just like to say that you know, it's a really good report, and there's a lot of issues in there which a lot of my colleagues have actually mentioned. Which that was it really. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies, Council. I was struggling to pick some of that up because it was fading in and out. But I think there's a little bit there about electric charging. I think one of our proposed sites for the new rapid charging is in your ward. So yeah.
It is, yeah. Yeah, no, I had that's why I mentioned I had a meeting about that earlier this week with Ross and Amy. And they just, you know, went through some plans of what's to come.
Okay, and that's, I mean, also that is a good point. Is in addition to the rapid charges that Councillor Lacey mentioned, one of the issues that we will have to address is, of course, people who live in terraced houses with no off-street parking. And so, you know, we're trying to do that in terms of where we look to position our charging setups so that they're in closer to more densely housing areas. But obviously you've got specific areas in Newport with large amounts of terraced housing, and so addressing that is going to be a key challenge for us.
Electric lights posts elsewhere.
Yeah, they're not without their challenges though, because of course we're in some certain areas with narrow paving and you know, trailing leads we've got to be careful of. And of course, no one has an absolute right to park on the highway. You know, people think that they do because it's outside their house, but so it's a big challenge, that area. So it's probably going to be a blended approach, and we're looking at that now with a piece of work currently that Ross is working on.
Interesting. On that one,
go on, sorry, Chris.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I didn't want to go off on a tangent, so at the risk of going off on a tangent on that one, maybe looking at, I did say this in the pre-meeting, working with community councils who tend to be rural, but perhaps not in Rogerstone, for their common areas, to have electric charge points there. You know, like the welfare is perfect, and I know, you know, Basleg has got a few particular sites as some of the more rural community councils. You know, the problem with that is that you miss then the more urbanized areas. You know, and I get that. You know, so it's a catch-22, but just not.
It is in terms of, you know, we want to make sure that no one's excluded. So you're not excluded just because you can't afford a bigger house with a drive, but also a big constraint for us is the invisible things we can't see under the ground. So where Western Power goes and where they have enough juice, there's constraints currently. Ross, I don't know if you wanted to come in a bit more on the EV.
Yeah, it's just to say, you know, we are trying to do a blended approach, a mix of these ultra rapid chargers, you know, that will serve a range of purposes. There's a project we're working on with Cardiff City Region around electric taxis, providing rapid chargers for those, and also vehicles that can be lent out for trial to sort of start that transition amongst our taxi fleets that are obviously doing quite high mileage. And we've, as Paul referenced there, we've commissioned a piece of work this this year that has involved a lot of stakeholders internally to take their views on how we should be delivering charges on streets, sort of on the highway for residents, and we'll really be setting out a policy about how we want to approach that, and also some kind of design guidance to make sure we take into account all the factors, you know, around sort of use of pavements, sort of DDA requirements, you know, distance from trees, distance from people's properties, consultation around new charges, and also we've done quite a comprehensive exercise looking at the areas that have the highest density of no off-street parking. We've actually got really good data on that, so it's allowed us to kind of highlight some priority areas that we're making sure we focus those charges in the right place. But I'm very interested, Councillor Evans, to speak to sort of any other bodies about areas, you know, where they have good local knowledge. And they
We'd
have
have one in
sort of
Rogerstone, one we have on Community Council in Rogerstone. Yeah, they'll have one there. In fact, we'll have 4.
Okay, we have put
I've
some.
got no power. I've got no power or dictate. And probably, if I suggested, as I said, as regards another meeting, they'll probably reject it. So you'll be better going through somebody else. But yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Matthew Evans.
No, so I tried to raise my hand a bit earlier. It was just to some clarification of what Yvonne said about home school transport, and I just wanted clarification about monitoring it from her, really, because I might have missed the point, so perhaps she could clarify it. But if she was talking about schools and head teachers collating information, then I certainly wouldn't be in favour of that at the moment with all the workload they've got on. So Yvonne, sorry, I just wanted, was that what you were saying?
Yes, I mean, all schools, all head teachers produce a school report, and you know, with a lot of data in it on attendance, and alongside the attendance, we could report how many children come to school by bus or by car or by foot. So I think if you measured it, it would concentrate minds on that point.
Well, just a personal view at the moment, I think head teachers have got a hell of a lot of work to do at the moment. They already collate a lot of information. Trying to get that information from parents would be a fairly onerous task, in my opinion, because some parents might drop them off occasionally, or I'm trying to get them back. I'm just trying to be realistic, and I certainly wouldn't want that to become policy where I'm a school governor. But because I think at the moment they've got plenty of things to concern themselves with the COVID crisis and everything else they need to monitor. But that's a personal view. So.
Yeah, some schools have already done this in some areas of Newport. I can't remember exactly which ones, but I think John Griffiths was working with some schools. So some schools have already done it. So I think it certainly is possible.
Yeah, well, I'm more in favour of schools encouraging people to walk or cycle to school. I guess it was just trying to monitor and collate information, which was my concern at the moment. But happy to agree to disagree with you, Yvonne.
Can I just back in?
Oh, sorry. Could I caution on this? Collating the numbers of children that come to school in a car, etc., etc. In my own comprehensive, 45% of our children are out of catchment because it's quite a popular school, and we also have a unit attached to it. And unless we take a root and branch reform of education and go back to the old strict catchment areas, we are very much in the position where we're restricting the parents' choice of where they can send their children to school. And I think this is covered by UK legislation as well as Welsh legislation.
I just wanted to come back in and say some schools were doing it a little while ago without too much difficulty. But I also wanted to move on to reporting on this plan. So we're going to publish it in February 2022, and I wondered how it's going to be reported on in the years after that, will we have a report in February 2023, for example, and will that come to scrutiny in future years?
Do you want me to comment on that, Paul?
Yeah, no, I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, I think we plan to have an annual report that will go alongside the corporate plan, because I think it should be quite linked into that work. That's probably the next bit of the work we need to do, is to really get some detail into what we'll report against some of these sort of actions and priorities that we've agreed. I mean, there are some measures in there, but I think we need to be a bit clearer about what that will look like. So we'll start to map that out, and there'll be some detail on that when we publish the final plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised, but I would like to ask another question, if I may. Or based on obviously the Welsh government yesterday producing their report, do we see any? This was brought up by another member earlier on, the pre-meeting. Are there any major clashes or glaring omissions between our report and theirs, or have you not had a chance to sort of scrutinise through what was produced yesterday? I'm guessing, give you a bit of time, but do you foresee any major changes or clashes within the two reports?
Ross was up all night last night reading it until he gets to sleep. But like I said, we have been a bit involved in terms of the build-up. We hadn't seen the final version, but there's nothing in there that we think is a surprise. It will take us a couple of days to scrutinise it fully, but we don't think so. We think we're all on the same page. But if there is, we will obviously reflect that. It's just a matter of timing. So we can't wait forever, and there's different plans coming out all the time. So in some ways, I think, will this be an annual update? We'll have a chance to reflect changes in legislation, and it's a really fast-moving area now, so expect it to be changed. And I think probably we don't need to worry so much if we do need to change as we go along, as long as we get to the end game. And so I think it's designed to be fluid. So yeah, hopefully that should be okay. If there are any big items, I think we will happily report them into scrutiny group. But let's hope not.
Okay, and just on the consultation process, I know it's been mentioned about consulting with different groups, etc. So we're notoriously bad at our consultation, getting our responses back in. What are we going to do that's going to get us the more responses on this one, because it's such an important, this one now actually affects every single resident of Newport City and wider. So what are we doing on this report, which is a brilliant report, well written, as we've all said, to get the responses back in that we've not done on our previous ones?
Emma, I think that's one for you.
Well, the plan, I think it's a really important report for young people. I think that the impacts of climate change are essentially going to have the biggest impacts on them, really. So we do have plans to speak to quite a lot of young people groups and actually engage through schools as well, and that's going to be part of our focus. We will do the normal things. There will be a survey online, obviously. I think it's quite key that we engage with our partners as well and make sure that they feel that we've considered all the right things in the plan. So we're going to be going out through the PSB or the PSB networks to make sure that although the public sector and third sector organisations are involved, but I think there's probably some work to go out to businesses locally as well and ask them what their feedback is as well. So we're waiting for the Welsh translation to come through, and then hope to go out for consultation sort of sometime next week.
But if there are particular groups or other organisations that you think that we should be engaging with, by all means, that's feedback we welcome.
Yeah, that definitely. We definitely add them all to the list.
Thanks, Councillor Evans. Matthew Evans.
Yeah, sorry, just following on from that, it's a really important point, and I think the public buy-in with the residents. Ironically, I think we talk about consulting them via Newport Matters, but perhaps Newport Matters is something of that we will be ditching in future. If you look at the footprint of the newspapers, but short, succinct, easy to follow questionnaire for the residents of the city, because I think their views are probably as important as everybody else's, and we recognise that council consultation isn't particularly good. So something along that lines, I think, is critical.
We also have, just also to add, we also have plans for a short animation that will go out via social media, so just to get people engaged via that platform as well, because and because there are quite a lot of you know, the public will engage on that platform where they won't engage in any other way. So just so you're aware of that, that may not go live next week, but will go live later on in the month.
And that approach worked really well with the active travel consultation, which was one that's, you know, we did get a lot of feedback from, and specific useful feedback as well. So yeah, I think we've got to engage on all platforms really. Great,
thank you.
Thank you. I think the timing couldn't be better, as you said. We're sort of this is coming out at a really, really brilliant time with COP26 and everything else that's going on. So it's in the forefront of everybody's minds at the moment, isn't it? I can't see any other hands raised, so I'd just like to thank you all for your time. I guess we'll continue with the discussion on the report and feedback, but thank you ever so much for all your time and all the effort that's gone into this report. Like I said, it's a really nice, refreshing report to read, and it's something that, you know, we look forward to being part of over the next coming years.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got conclusions on the report, really. Are there any recommendations? I mean, I think I'm the report as is, I'm happy with myself personally. Obviously, that's my view on this. I don't think we need to add anything else. I think it's concise. My main concern on this would be the consultation process, but it seems to have been thought out and going forward. But I'm happy to take comment across the floor on this one.
I just want to say, with regards to the consultation process, will they be able to actually, I know she mentioned Emma mentioned it was going to be in Welsh. You know, a lot of the community, the BAME community, don't speak very good English, and Welsh is far from it. Maybe they should make a video with maybe several, you know, other languages as well, which could be a possibility to get more people involved.
I think it's a shame. Oh. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a shame you didn't bring that up a couple of it would be nice to have gotten a response from them. But I mean, I guess from a video perspective, hopefully that could be something that we can perhaps put in there, Connor, that we can ask the question if it can be translated into the sort of maybe the two other main languages. I think there's about 4 or 5 widely spoken in Newport, but I guess we'd need to pick some of the top ones, don't we, rather than going down them all. Councillor Matthew Evans, you stuck your camera back on. Is there any comment?
No, Chair, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, so are we happy with the report as it stands? And hopefully the consultation process will be better. So will we all happy?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Good.
Yes.
Sounds good to me. Okay, so finally we've got our forward work programme.
Yep, so at the moment, sorry, trying to juggle sending live and the actual reports at the moment. So sorry, I've already spotted a mistake that I've made there. It's Friday 10th of December at 10 AM, our standard start time. It says 9 AM for some reason in the agenda for the Welsh language strategy. I've been reassured that'll be in place on time. Obviously, they weren't sure exactly when it was coming to us, but that has been fully put through now, and then nothing till January for the draft budget. I just wanted to make a note as to the outcomes of the last meeting as well with it, which is that obviously there were a lot of responses that people weren't happy with the consultation, and members weren't happy with the way that consultations are carried out. It's not just been sent to the department, it's been sent to policy and partnerships as well, as they would be in control to some degree of the budget, so as to what we can do for consultations across the council in future.
Okay, that's good. I think that's one of our biggest downfalls, that we do all this work, or the officers do this work, we consult on, we as a scrutiny consult, and then it goes out to consultation and we get 50 responses back from a whole city, and it's and that's down to us. It's down to us at the end of the day that we need to advertise it more, and the same thing that we say with the budget every year, everything. So it'll be interesting to see how this one gets on, I think. Matthew, did you have a comment there?
Yeah, and just on that point, I think from either last year or this year or the previous year or the last 7 years, we've actually made a recommendation that we should start consulting about the budget now, before we've even announced the consultation in December. So, prior consultation before it actually becomes, so that we don't have this issue of going out to consultation in, well, essentially about the 22nd of December. But
Chair, with due respects to Matthew, how does he propose we do this when we don't know what the rate support grant will be? We don't know how much money is coming by the Barnett formula. We've had a autumn statement yesterday, and it's still last week, sorry, it's still as clear as mud how much money will come into the system.
Well, there has been the 3-year proposals which have been put forward, but I mean, ultimately, if you're looking at any specific areas of consultation, then by having almost an all year round consultation about things, you don't have to wait to the budget if you want to make savings. So, for instance, had we gone out to consultation about potentially having car parking charges in the cemetery or something like that, then it could have been something which at an earlier stage could have been ruled out, and other things actually could have been taken forward. So what I'm trying to say is it should be an all year round thing. By announcing everything on the 22nd of December or 19th of December or something, and getting those consultations in before the 20th of January or something, is not something, I think we've all agreed, is not best practice, and it's something we need to be better at when we're moving forward.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. Point taken there. But okay, so is that it, Connor? So that's great. So we'll see you all on the 10th of December.
Yeah, the Welsh
just
language.
before Christmas.
I'm just having a sandwich before I go. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Nice to see you, Chris. See you soon, guys.
Bye. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.